Welcome to Your Vote Counts, a candidate forum sponsored by Capital Community TV and the League of Women Voters of Marion and Polk Counties. My name is Bernadine Anderson, and I'm a member of League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan political organization that works to educate ourselves and the public about government issues. In this program, we will present two of the three candidates for the Legislative House District 21. They are alphabetically Brian Clem and Doug Rogers. We reached out to Mr. Alvin Clausen through phone calls and email and did not receive a response to our invitation to participate. Our format for this forum is as follows. Each candidate has 3 minutes to give an opening statement outlining their background, qualifications, and top 3 priorities if they're elected. Following that, each candidate will be given 1.5 minutes to answer questions that have been prepared by League of Women Voters members on the current issues. The candidates were not given the questions ahead of time. At the end, the candidates will have 2 minutes to make a closing statement in which to state the legacy they would like to leave if they're elected to that office. Prior to this, we drew for seating. Question order will rotate, so we'll begin with Mr. Clem as candidate A for his opening remarks, followed by Mr. Rogers as candidate B. Mr. Clem, would you please start your opening remarks?
Great, thank you, Bernadine, and also thank you to the League of Women Voters for doing this forum. I think it is always helpful for voters to get more information about candidates, especially in person where there's a chance to get some extemporaneous questioning. The voters pamphlet is great and it's a statement, but it's not a living, breathing process like this. So I always enjoy participating, and I want to thank the League for doing it. So I'm Brian Clem, and I'm the state representative for District 21 currently. I've held this position now for 5 terms. This would be, if you're so willing to hire me in November, rehire me, this would be my 6th term. And I've been in Salem for about 20 years now. I live here with my wife Carol and our daughter Kohana, who's in the 3rd grade at McKinley Elementary School, and our 2 beautiful cats, Charles and Clara. And obviously, in terms of my background for this job, I've held it now for 10 years, so I've become quite experienced at being a legislator in the 10 years. But I think more importantly than being a legislator, it's what kind of values do you bring to the job. Knowledge of the job is certainly very important, but what you do with your knowledge of the job matters. And I typically have brought sort of everyday Oregonian type values to the job. I still work with my hands, I fix computers, we have a farm, and for the last 10 years I've really worked hard to try and keep this position at least one of a citizen legislator who, I'm not a full-time politician, I have a real business, I make payroll every week for people, and I bring that to the Oregon Legislative Assembly. We have lots of great people in the legislature, but not all of them work anymore. Some are retired, some are really wealthy. I'm neither of those things. And I think it is equally important to be both experienced, but also bring a common sense kind of agenda. And I'm not particularly partisan. I'm more of a problem-solving kind of person. And I think that's what most voters are looking for, that we cross party lines when necessary to work together to advance Oregon's interests, not my political party's interests, not the interests of my campaign donors, but the people who live in Salem. I've been pleased to be reelected 4 times, elected once, reelected 4 times, and hoping to earn your support this time as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers, your opening remarks.
Okay, I really appreciate having an opportunity to be here today. My background has been in the construction-related industries for the last 30 or so years. I've managed and oversaw production departments, transportation, inventories, and safety has been my main focus. And I've also been on the transit board here in Salem, where I've worked with multi-million-dollar budgets and trying to work with 6 other directors that had different ideologies and thought processes than myself, and we all had to work together for the good of the community. Now I've got 3 things that are important to my heart. There's education, eliminating waste, and the PERS issue. With PERS, you know, when you when you ask the piper to play, one day you've got to pay him. And we're working with an overdue invoice. And 2017 is the year for hard choices. And it's unfortunate. The electorate is more likely to blame politicians dousing the flames than those who lit the match. But this is our problem. We've got to deal with it. And of course, anyone who tries to right the ship is not going to have very many friends, unless it's the state treasurer. Eliminating waste. How many of you have struggled with too much month at the end of the money? You know, we've learned how to save money without spending, and examples include turning down the water heater and wearing a sweater when it's colder, planning your shopping trips better. What we know as individuals that work, that help, we need to force the state to do the same. And there's also the issue of thousands and thousands and millions of dollars being wasted through programs that seemingly no one thought through properly. And so here we are flushing money down the toilet at the same time schools are crying for money. The additional funds are needed to give our children a proper education. I see a problem with that. Nationally, we rank in the middle of spending for education. On the other hand, every state that spends less money per pupil has a higher graduation rate. I think spending time examining how Utah or Oklahoma produce results could be very beneficial to the taxpayers and children alike.
Thank you. We're going to begin our questions. I would like to read it once. If you do need to hear it again, just please ask. First question. In recent years, the legislature has dedicated more funding for early childhood as well as higher education. Yet Oregon continues to have many low-performing schools, one of the shortest school years, and the fourth worst dropout rate. What legislation would you support to address these concerns? And Mr. Rogers, will begin with you.
Oh, I see.
Would you like the question again?
No, I heard the question.
Okay.
It's just one of those where I don't have a real solid answer on that.
Go ahead and
And
share
that's
your
just-
feelings about what you'd like to see done then.
Well, I would like to see anytime we have a question of, hey, can we get more money for this or more money for that? I really feel the first thing we ought to do is ask, what are you doing with the money that you get? Because oftentimes, like with my own job that I have, people are saying, well, we need money for the tools that we are needing for this particular project. And I say, well, what are you doing with the tools you have? And that should be the focus, to find the root cause as to why you need the money and what are you going to do with it when you get it.
Okay,
And that's my thoughts on that.
thank you very much. Mr. Clem?
Would you repeat it once for me?
Sure. In recent years, the legislature has dedicated more funding for early childhood as well as higher education. Yet Oregon continues to have many low-performing schools, one of the shortest school years, and fourth worst dropout rate. What legislation would you support to address these issues?
So in 2011, the legislature was in a tie, as some may remember, and we passed on a bipartisan basis a package of education reform bills that are just starting to take root, aimed at these problems. Unfortunately, these things don't just turn around overnight either, so you get started. And I voted for most of them. I didn't vote for all of them, but I voted for most of them. And in one, in fact, I was the key deciding vote, essentially with the Republicans, to pass a bill that would allow for some more competition, basically, within the public school system, where you could move between districts more easily, where you could do some online education if that fit your particular learning style better. And it wasn't always popular with the political education establishment, but it was aimed at students and parents and giving them more tools. So I've taken some tough votes to try and assist with that, and those things led to things like getting rid of the elected office of superintendent of public instruction, which often was a political position, and instead hiring somebody to do the job who was an education professional. Having said all that, the most important thing I think we can do is lower class sizes. Yesterday, I spent in my daughter's school for half a day volunteering in 4 different classes. There were 30 kids in the kindergarten. It was literally managed chaos. Teachers are the ones who are going to solve this problem for us. They need to be compensated fairly, and their class sizes have to be reasonable to do the job. So the legislation I would pass is more funding to get class sizes down specifically.
All right, thank you very much. This is question number 2. Some feel that partisan gridlock is interfering with the ability to achieve legislation that benefits the people of Oregon. Do you believe that that perception is justified? And what, if anything, can you do to change that perception? Mr. Clem, we'll begin with you.
It's a great question. It's probably going to be my favorite one. Do I think it's justified? 95% of the time there isn't partisan gridlock. The issues that you hear about where there are big issues that are complex and hard to come to terms with as human beings. I mean, there's good arguments on both sides. And so those are the ones you read about in the paper. Most of the time it's not a problem. Redistricting we did on a bipartisan basis. The education reform package I just described, bipartisan basis. Here's what I can say about my views. I think sometimes things are too partisan. I don't really like the caucus system where the 2 teams go meet separately, figure out their strategies, and act like the other person is the enemy. They're not. We're all Oregonians. I was elected to work with every single member of the legislature, regardless of party, who was sent there by their constituents. And that's the way it should be. And that's how I behave. It's not the law, it's not a requirement, it's even sometimes considered heretical against the system to do it, but that's how I behave. I've trained myself to not view the people I work with by party, but by person, by characteristic, by district. And the best indicator of that is I've chaired a committee now for 4 out of my 5 sessions. That's 8 years of chairing a committee. I have never once had a bill come out on a party line basis, not one ever. And that's a commitment I make to all my minority party members on my committees. You will be treated equally here. It's the merit of your ideas, not your political affiliation. And I think I've gained a lot of respect and admiration. It's not always popular with my party, but it's the way I feel, and I think it's important for Oregonians to know. Many of us care less about party and more about people and ideas.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers, question 2 to you.
Maybe repeat.
Of course.
Thank you.
Some feel that partisan gridlock is interfering with the ability to achieve legislation that benefits the people of Oregon. Do you believe that that perception is justified? And if you do, what would you suggest to change that perception?
Well, you're always going to get both. But what I hear about it from social media and what I read about in the papers, that when there's gridlock and infighting, that's what sells papers and that's what people want to see. But I know there's both, because I've spoken with people inside the legislature, and they've, and you can see what they vote on, the measures that come out, the bills that come out. You can see where many times, Republican and Democrats alike all vote together with just a few saying nay. So they've been working together, and I really do appreciate that. And if I am elected as legislator, one of the things that I'm going to push and put it right on the wall behind my head is, this office follows the golden rule. We treat people the way we want to be treated, whether they treat us in a good way or not. And once you start doing that, and it expands to the rest of the legislature, sometimes if you can get that to be, get the other legislators infected with that idea that, hey, this is really a better way to do business, I think you can get more done.
Okay, thank you both. This is question number 3. How do you view the current state of foster care in Oregon, and what should the role of the newly appointed director be? Mr. Rogers.
I see advertisements and I've seen reports where there's a lot of foster kids out there who are needing And I get a little nervous. You know, who's vetting the people who will be taking the foster kids in, because you hear of abuse, and the state should be protecting children. That should be the number one priority. And so you don't want to put the children into just any home. And so the role of the director would be first and foremost to make sure there's a proper vetting system in place, and that if there's any kind of question after the fact of placing a child in a home, that somebody's there extremely fast and double checking on the children's welfare.
Thank you. Mr. Clem.
I think the foster system has some challenges. I think one of the problems with the foster system is that too many of us view it apart from our lives and ourselves. And in particular in Salem, I was really proud when the community came together in sort of a community-led initiative for people to become foster parents and even adopt more kids, because it's too hard for government to take the place of a family. And when people don't step up to play this role, you're left with people who are doing it with sometimes different motivations. That's why, Doug's point's a good one. You have to screen, because why are you doing it? Is it for the kid? Is it for the income? Why are you doing the role of foster care? And it really has to come from the heart. It has to be people who love these kids and want to take care of them. And there are some problems systemically in the system where kids are removed from homes that are very loving because too much time has passed and it's time to move them on to the next one. I think we have to change the system, that if somebody wants to have the child stay with them longer and they love them and there's a bond, it's not time to take them out. It's time to make it easier. And being penalized by adopting, for example, instead of just getting another foster kid, hurts the kid. And our incentives are often perverse. But I think we all have to view it as, how do we help care for these children? And some are refugees from other war-torn countries now coming to Oregon. And it's something people with hearts have to engage in, not just government.
Thank you. This is question 4. The legislature has a responsibility for a transportation package. How should this be developed, and what elements would you like to see included? Mr. Clem?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, as you may know, the way it's being developed now is one that I would say is the way it should be being developed. That's a joint transportation commission, House and Senate, bipartisan, traveling all around the state, listening to communities. They were in Hillsborough last week. They were in Eastern Oregon the week before. So I think the way they're doing it right now is the right way to do it. I think previously in the 2013-2015 session, their groundwork to go all over Oregon and listen to everybody's needs for their communities wasn't really done. The last time that was really done was back in the 07-08 time period, before the big 09 transportation package. So I think this broad, bipartisan, bicameral listening session to Oregon is the right way to do it. You do have these local area transportation plans, and SCATs, I think ours is called, Salem-Keizer Area Transportation something, and it is a way to get a prioritized list of what the right projects are. I don't think it should be a political process where the party in control gets their projects and the other party doesn't. I think it should be made by the needs of the community. So I'm very optimistic. I'm certainly more than willing to support a transportation package. The state needs it badly. Bridges, roads, multimodal, bike ped, buses in the Salem area, particularly on weekends. So I'm looking forward to it, but I think we're going about it the right way, and it by definition needs to be bipartisan to get to the 36 votes needed to do it, because there is not one party with 36 votes. So I hope we continue to do it together.
Thank you. And Mr. Rogers?
I don't disagree at all with Brian said. As a member of the Transportation Board for a couple of years, funding was always foremost on our minds. And I think with any kind of bill that you would want to put forth that would affect someone, an organization or a group of people, this is something where in transportation, we would reach out to everyone in the state who deals with transportation. In Salem, we have ours. In Portland, they've got TriMet. Eugene and Astoria, all these towns and cities, because we can't just be here in Salem and arbitrarily say, well, this is what you're going to get. This is what we feel you need this, and therefore, we'll give you that much. But working together and not leaving any stone unturned to be able to get the money that is needed to continue with the various transportation things, like, well, for me it was the buses.
All right, thank you. We're going to take one last question, and we're going to take it to a 1-minute response. And here's the question. Describe a critical issue facing your district and how you wish to address it. And Mr. Rogers, we'll start with you.
When we're talking past or future? Because one I dealt with a couple of years ago.
All right, if that's a critical issue in your district, go with that.
Okay. Well, for me, and again, back to the transportation, we need to get people from point A to point B in a timely fashion for their jobs, to get to their doctor's appointments or whatever it is, whatever else they need to go. That's what you need for a vibrant community. And when we had the Courthouse Square fiasco, that just sucked money out of the coffers and made it difficult for the transit line to be able to do its job. And being a part of fixing that to the satisfaction, I think, of just about everybody was real pleasing to me.
Thank you. Mr. Clem.
I'm going to cheat and try and slip 3 here in 1 minute. One is kind of a neighborhood, but it's also a district issue, and this is the redevelopment of the north a portion of the Oregon State Hospital campus, and making that a win-win for both the neighborhood and livability in Salem is critical. I've been actively involved in that for several years, but finishing it off right is very important. Another one that's important is PERS. We have to make sure that if we change and alter PERS in any way, we don't violate the contract rights of my constituents. Many people in Salem utilize PERS. I voted against the past reforms because they violated the contract rights, and the Oregon Supreme Court agreed with me. I was the only member of my party in the whole legislature to do so. Lastly, since I have about 10 seconds left, I would say that the funding generally of government is important because we have so many people working in public service, and balancing the budget and making sure that we have enough revenue to support those who work in public service and their kids who go to school is critical.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we'll have our candidates make their closing remarks. They have 2 minutes each, and we'll begin with Mr. Rogers.
Okay. Well, you talked about legacy. Well, legacy really isn't my favorite word. It reminds me of the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar, who walked out on his palace balcony and saw his city and said, "Look what I have done." And that just doesn't fit how I wish to be remembered. In fact, I really don't care if you remember me at all. It's not about me. What I care about is that people live quiet, peaceful lives with good jobs, and children graduating from school and budget surpluses for a rainy day. That's what I would like to see. And if you remember going camping with your family, what you were told before you left. The legacy my father gave to me, and the one I wish to pass on to my fellow Oregonians, is he left it better than he found it.
Thank you. Mr. Clem.
You know, I've had a few bills that you could consider legacy bills, like the protection of the Metolius River. That's something that forever I'll get to go and point to that work that was done in 2009 to save that river. But in the end, it's not a bill that I want to be remembered for. It's by Oregonians, and particularly my colleagues from the other side of the aisle, that we made government work here, that we don't fight like they do in Washington, D.C., that we are citizen legislators who come here to solve problems and to take on the biggest challenges that Oregon has: the economy, education funding, our budget, health care, income inequality, and that we did it together, that we were more unified and found more in common than apart. And I think that's a big challenge in government. this lack of unity, this disunity, this fighting nationally particularly and in some states is leading to us falling behind the rest of the world. I do business and end up traveling a lot around the world, and many other countries are far more unified in pursuing their goals and objectives, and they're catching up to us, in some places surpassing our educational efforts and attainment. And I think a lot of it has to do with our inability to see us all as one team. And I think until we find people who want to focus on unity rather than being right, 100% right, and getting everything they want, I think we're going to keep having these problems. The Oregon legislature, to me, has been a place where we can do that, where we can work together across the aisle and solve problems regardless of party for the betterment of Oregon. I fear that's not where we're headed for more years in Washington, D.C., so I'm interested in making Oregon the place to work and hopefully leading by example for the rest of the country to see that in Oregon, as they said in the 70s, things work better here.
Thank you both very much. This is all the time we have. You have been watching Your Vote Counts, a candidate forum for Legislative House District 21 with Mr. Brian Clem and Mr. Doug Rogers. We hope you will watch our other candidate forums, and please see the CCTV website for their time and dates. These forums are a public service to voters to become more acquainted with candidates who hope to lead our city, county, and state governments in the coming years. Ballots will be mailed on October 20th and should be returned by November 8th at 8 p.m. We urge you to make democracy work and be a voter. This is Vernadine Anderson for the League of Women Voters and CCTV, thanking you all for watching Your Vote Counts.